The Incredibles, a super summer barbecue. One hot summer afternoon, Helen Parr stood in the kitchen frosting a chocolate cake. Her daughter Violet lay on the couch reading a magazine. Jack the baby sat in his high chair eating. Dash, Helen called to her other son. It's almost time to leave for the barbecue. Hey, Mom, complained Dash, running into the room at super speed. Why do we have to go to some silly neighborhood barbecue? Dashiell Robert Parr, said Helen. We're lucky to have been invited. It's our first neighborhood party. You know we're doing our best to fit in here. And remember, no superpowers outside the house. Right, Mom, no superpowers. The barbecue should be loads of fun, said Dash, rolling his eyes. I think he's being sarcastic. Just then, Jack threw a bowl of mashed peas. In a flash, Helen stretched her arm across the kitchen and caught the bowl in midair. Helen's superpowers as Elastigirl could come in pretty handy around the house, but she knew if her family's powers were ever discovered, they would have to move again. Bob Parr walked through the front door. Honey, I've got the lawn looking ship-shape, he said as he flexed his muscles. Bob used to fight crime on a daily basis as the super Mr. Incredible. But now his biggest weekend battle was the crabgrass. He sighed. I finally got the last of that giant tree stump. If I could have used my super strength, I would have done it 3 hours ago. You're right, dear, Helen answered, giving him a kiss on the cheek. But you know we have to do our best to behave like a normal family. I only have a few more boxes to unpack, and I don't want to move this family again. No one will ever believe Violet is normal, said Dash. Violet jumped from the couch. You be quiet, she shouted. Then she threw a force field in Dash's path, knocking him to the ground. Kids, that's enough. Let's get ready to go, said Helen. A little while later, the Parrs walked around the block to their first neighborhood barbecue. Helen smiled at Jack, who was in a baby backpack. I hope they like my cake, she said as she walked to the dessert table. Bob headed over to the grill to help out. Violet looked around for someone to talk to. Dash watched some kids compete in a sack race. He couldn't race because it might reveal his super speed. Then a boy walked up to Dash. Are you too chicken to play? Bark, 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 clucked the boy, flapping his arms. Some of the other kids laughed. Dash scowled. If only I could race, I'd show that kid. When that mean boy hopped by, he mysteriously tripped and fell. Weird, the boy said. It felt like someone tripped me. Dash smiled to himself, then brushed off his sneaker. His speed had come in handy after all. Luckily, his mom hadn't seen him. Meanwhile, Helen was getting to know some of the other mothers and toddlers. She listened carefully as other women talked about removing grass stains. When the women began to discuss needlepoint, Helen realized that Jack had crawled away. Out of the corner of her eye, Helen saw Jack atop a high brick wall. He was about to topple off. Oh no, that'd be ouchy. In a flash, Helen shot her arm all the way across the yard and caught him. She sighed with relief and hugged Jack close to her. The other mother just rubbed her eyes and mumbled something about not sleeping much the night before. Oops, Helen thought to herself. Over by the grill, the men talked about the previous night's baseball game. When the steak was ready, Bob stepped forward. Allow me, he said, as he picked up a knife. This steak is a bit tough, he thought. I'll just cut a little harder. Crack! All of a sudden, the table splintered in two. The meat went flying and landed in the dirt. Guess I used a little too much super strength, Bob thought. They just didn't make they don't make tables like they used to, do they, fellas? Bob asked as the others laughed politely. Violet hadn't found anyone her age, so she sat under a tree and began to read. Then an old lady came by. Violet stood up and introduced herself. Once she did, the woman wouldn't stop talking. She told Violet about her miniature duck collection, her dentures, and even her hot water bottle. Finally, Violet couldn't stand it anymore. As the woman reached the 33 of her potato salad, step 33 of her potato salad recipe, Violet pointed at something. The woman turned and Violet seized the moment. She jumped behind a tall plant and used her superpowers to make herself invisible. Even then, only her body disappeared. The colors of her clothes blended in with the bushes. Minutes went by. Finally, the lady noticed that Violet wasn't standing next to her. She looked all around and then walked away. When the coast was clear, Violet reappeared. She smiled to herself as she sat back down and opened her book. Since the steak had fallen on the ground, Bob and the other guys decided to grill some hot dogs and hamburgers. Bob didn't help this time, but he did eat one or two more hot dogs than he should have. Helen couldn't have been more pleased to see the neighbors enjoying her chocolate cake. Someone even asked for the recipe. She looked around the yard and spotted Dash telling a story. Violet was eating an ice cream cone with a girl her age. Wow, it looks like we really fit in here, Helen thought as Bob walked over to her. He was finishing another hot dog. Just then, she overheard one of the neighbors. "There's something really strange about those Pars," she said. Helen grabbed Bob's arm. Bob looked at her. Had someone discovered them? Were their superpowers about to be revealed? "Yeah, you should see how Bob mangled the table. And the steak," the second neighbor said. "Grandma said that Violet acted like she'd never heard of potato salad before," the third neighbor chimed in. "And my son said Dash just watched the other kids race." "All that may be true," someone else added, "but that Helen sure makes a terrific chocolate cake." Everyone agreed, and the conversation ended. The Pars sighed with relief and chuckled to themselves. Their cover wasn't blown after all. Maybe they were a little strange compared to the average family, but they were doing their best to act normal. Bob and Helen rounded up their kids and headed home, pleased with the way things had gone. "I think we could really like this neighborhood, Bob," said Helen as they reached their home. Then she gave him a great big kiss, which the kids did their best to ignore. "I think you're right," answered Bob, "but I've got a good feeling about things this time." "Sweetie, would you mind moving the car over a bit?" asked Helen. "I need to get out of the garage to go grocery shopping tomorrow." "Sure thing, honey," answered Bob. "I'll be right in." Bob looked at the car sitting in the driveway. The street was quiet. It's too easy, he thought to himself. Besides, a guy's got to work out every now and then. Bob picked up the car, balanced it on one finger, and put it down on the other side of the driveway. Dusting his hands off, he turned around to find Rusty, a little neighborhood boy, sitting on his tricycle, with his mouth hanging open. Have a good evening, Rusty," said Bob, giving him a little wave. Then he went inside and enjoyed the rest of his evening with his super family. The end.